Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ninth in a series of webinars from Killarney Chamber of Tourism and Commerce. Today's webinar offers an insight into how to make search engines work for you and your business. Our presenter today is James Crothall. James is an account director with AMO Digital, where he helps organizations with web analytics, digital marketing, and online optimization. James has over 15 years professional marketing experience and will share with us today some personal learnings from working with businesses like Hodge Robinson Group, American Express Travel, Hargreaves Lansdowne, and Barclays Bank. As usual, please feel free to use the question box throughout, and my colleague Niall will facilitate Q&A at the end of the presentation. So now, James, if you're ready, over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Paul, and thank you everyone for joining. Thanks to the Chamber for having me this morning. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping points. And firstly, I'd like to say that, look, every organisation is different. There's no one-size-fits-all strategy for search engine marketing and specifically search engine optimization. And every business has its individual goals. So I'd also like to say that we'll be focusing on organic search this morning, not pay-per-click or paid search. And there will be a lot of focus on Google. There are stats out there to show that Google is the most widely used search engine. And the consensus amongst SEOs is that actually Google, if you're optimizing for Google, then you're also optimizing for the likes of Bing and Yahoo and AltaVista, etc. As Paul says, do feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. Or if you don't feel comfortable, feel free to send me an email. My address is towards the end of the deck as well. And lastly, whilst you're more than welcome to make notes, this presentation will be available to download afterwards, and I'll be sharing a link to a web page to be able to do that on the final slide of the deck. So I'm James Crothall. I have a degree in business management and marketing from Cardiff University, which seems like a lifetime ago now. I also did a postgraduate award in search marketing. And the reason I did that is because a lot of my SEO work was actually self-taught, and I kind of wanted to get some ratification really of what I was doing. The award took place, I think, back in 2013, and that was run by the Institute of Data and Marketing in the UK. I actually managed to get top student in that certification, so they made me a lifetime member, which is very pleasing. My experience has been in traditional and digital roles, so that's why it's professional marketing experience over the last 15 years or so. I started out at Hodge Robinson Group doing market research and more traditional kind of print advertising and that kind of thing, branding, and then moved on to digital quite quickly, really, and worked with a startup, which was exciting, and did a lot of learning and making a lot of mistakes through optimization, but ultimately taking a lot of learnings from those, and then found myself doing work for two FTSE 100 firms, one Hargreaves Lansdowne, one Barclays Bank. The most recent, I was VP of customer engagement within digital investing, looking after a proposition that was in front of around about 300,000 customers, and leading a team that produced digital content to educate both prospects and customers about the investing world. Everything from video to infographic to long form articles, managing a content production process, so effectively publishing web pages and getting them in front of audiences in different channels, including paid search, social media, paid social media, and organic search. Last year, I spent 12 months working with an agency based in London, and it was exciting because I was managing multiple clients' digital marketing campaigns, both challenging and exciting. But that led me to AMO Digital, which was formed in January this year, and we help, as Paul mentioned, we help organisations with web analytics. So that's understanding how your website is working, acquisition of traffic, behaviour, conversion metrics, and digital marketing, so promotion of your website to the right audiences, content, biddable media, that kind of thing. And lastly, optimization, which is what I'm talking about today, search engine optimization, but we also help organizations with conversion rate optimization, which is CRO. Conversion rate optimization is the process of ensuring that whatever goal you have on your site, that the conversion rate is the highest it can be for your users. So what I'd like to talk about today, how search engines work, relevance, authority, and context. What are your prospects and customers searching for? So your audiences, what are they interested in, and how to go about building what we'd call a keyword universe. On-site optimization, so these are things within your control. These are things like site structure, metadata, and best practices when it comes to the technical elements of your website. And as I mentioned, these are absolutely things you can control, and you should take the effort to optimize to the best of your efforts. Local listings, we'll look at some real life examples of maps. News, and looking at accelerated mobile pages and how news can respond differently on mobile. Shopping, so I attended a webinar from the Chamber with a gentleman called Vinny who presented around e-commerce, so I thought I'd mention some slight differences in the search engine results page. You might hear me saying SERP quite a bit through the presentation. This is search engine results page, and the differences in the SERP between local news, shopping, and general search. And finally, Google Search Console, which is a free tool from Google, available to any website out there. You place a line of code within your website, and Google gives you very rich information around your website and how it's performing in search. And I'll talk a bit about what you can do with that and how it looks. Before we dive in, though, I just wanted to share a slide that Google have published, not that recently, it's probably maybe 5 years old, but it's certainly worth just looking at before I get into the main part of the presentation. So this is essentially showing that for any activity, marketing-led, it's actually based on a marketing theory, which is called AIDA, A-I-D-A. And that stands for awareness, interest, desire, action. So Google rebadged this and kind of did some work around what they've labeled ZMOT, or zero moment of truth. And the reason I'm showing this is because a stimulus, it could be a conversation in a pub, it could be you sat at home of an evening with the pouring rain outside thinking that you'd quite like to go on holiday. There's some sort of stimulus that drives an action. And within that zero moment of truth, you're in the research phase, and then once you get to your first moment of truth, that's at shelf or in store or online, you're making a purchase, then you become potentially an advocate, or you look at your experience with the product. But moreover, it's in this presentation, what I'm trying to get across is the fact that for a stimulus that results in a search, you have the ability to maximize your efforts in an effort to rank well within Google or other search engines. And you want to do that because being in front of those searchers, those users that are using Google as a reaction to their stimulus, will drive clicks to your website, and ultimately you want to be able to convert them to business. So that's really what I'm trying to get across, is that there are things within your control that you can do to maximize your chances of ranking well within Google, and hopefully there'll be some techniques that I can show you throughout that will enable you to do that. So how search engines work, I'll confess to not reading the academic paper that was written by the two founders of Google back in, I think, the 90s. However, the general premise is that search engines were created as a way for a user to find the best possible result on the internet for a given search query. So that's quite a remarkable thing to consider. That in this day and age, there are billions upon trillions of web pages on the internet. And a simple 1 or 2, 3 word search can bring you back what a search engine deems to be the best result. And the way they do that, search engine wise, is through 3 major things, or at least it's what I consider how they do it. So one is relevance, and that's defined by search metrics, which is an SEO piece of software, as the extent to which the content of a website corresponds to the search term used. So a search engine Googlebot is what the crawler is called. Is searching the internet to find relevant terms and topics and copy and imagery around the content that the user is searching for, or the keywords that the user is searching for. So relevance of your website is really important. It affects how high a website will appear in the search results. It's not the only factor, of course. There are hundreds that Google take into consideration, but it is an important one. So a very simplistic example might be that if you have a business that sells pencils online, you might purchase the domain name pencils.com, because immediately Google will understand that your website is something to do with pencils, and if those users are searching for pencils or pencils for sale, and there is a difference between those two keywords that I'll touch on in a moment, then pencils.com is relevant to that search term. So that's the first thing to consider, is relevance of your website. Does it have keywords appropriate to the search terms being used? Authority is defined by Search Engine Land, a leading SEO kind of publication online, as being widely recognized as a leader in your field or business sector, and that's useful when the goal is to rank well in terms of organic search. So Google's trying to build a picture of not only websites that are relevant online, but also those that are authoritative. So it does this in a number of ways. It looks at links from other websites to your web page or website. So it sees those links as a vote of confidence, okay, and it also takes into consideration the relevance of those links. So using the pencils example, if there was a link to pencils.com from a news article about pencils, if there is such a thing, Google would see that as a huge vote of confidence to pencils.com, because there's been a web link published by a news site, and the authority of that site comes into play as well. So if it's something like the Irish Times, which would be considered an authority because there's lots of links pointing to that site in turn, it's going to be of benefit to your site. Now, I should say that there are practices out there known as kind of black hat SEO that include kind of link farming, etc., where website owners would publish a great deal of kind of spammy links in an effort to kind of trick Google. That's not what we want to achieve here. Organic link building is kind of a separate process, and something that you can do through online and digital PR. And you shouldn't try to just get hundreds of links for the sake of it. They should be good quality links that grow organically. So content marketing is a very useful method of building those links, for example. The actual anchor text within a link, so using the pencils example again, is important too. So this is the text that sits over the top of the hyperlink on a web page. And instead of using something like click here or find out more, using link text that is relevant to the search term or the content is important too. So for example, if the link within the news article that talks about pencils was hyperlinked, and the anchor text, the link text was pencils for sale here, and that pointed to pencils.com, that would be seen as not only a huge vote of confidence, but very relevant as well. So that link text is important when links are coming into your site. When looking at authority, Google also takes into account engagement metrics, and it does this in a number of ways, but primarily those sites which have Google Analytics installed. It would look at how websites are performing in terms of engagement from organic search. So for example, if you had a top ranking site and there was a click that was won from the search engine results page, but the bounce rate was incredibly high. So bounce rate means when a user lands on a web page but immediately hits back. That would tell Google that actually it's probably not that great a web page because there's been a lot of bounces. Now, there's been various research into how much Google takes this into account. It's not known for sure, as I mentioned at the beginning. It's not an exact science SEO, I'm afraid, but it is known that they do take it into consideration. So having a usable website and one that's sticky in content and allows users to stay on the site is also of benefit. Age of domain is something that unfortunately as new businesses you can't really replicate, because a domain that's been around for 10, 20 years does have a greater amount of authority in Google's eyes. So one way of maybe getting around that, if you are a new business, is to purchase an old domain that may have been registered for a number of years. Be careful if you do go down that road, because obviously there'll be content published to that domain, and it doesn't want to be spammy or anything like that. So just be careful if you do go down that road. But the age of a domain does come into effect. And of course, probably the most important when it comes to authority is adherence to Google's webmaster guidelines. So these are published by Google, they're openly available, and they give an idea of how your website should be built. And if you go against these guidelines, then it can very much harm your website. So there are certain things that you need to stay away from and avoid doing, which I'll talk about in a moment. So that's authority. Context is the last bit I'll talk about in terms of how search engines work, and it's just to show you really that there are a lot of factors going on that are beyond your control really when it comes to a user. So this is a screenshot of Google, and this is in a signed out incognito browser. So firstly, you can see that Google's recognized that I'm in Ireland. That's through IP address. So immediately there'll be results that are localized in terms of geography. And as I said just a moment ago, I'm signed out in this particular browser, so it's got no search history whatsoever. This is a completely new, a completely clean search that I'm about to show you. So this example is Paris Hilton, and in this particular example, Google has actually got this wrong, and I'll show you why. This search has brought up the celebrity. We've got a Wikipedia entry, a knowledge graph, some asked bits here and top stories, but actually I was interested in French hotels. Okay, so context-wise, Google has no idea what I'm interested in until I perform my second search, which is French hotels, and it's perhaps no coincidence that the first hotel in the map listing, which I'll go into in more detail later in the deck, is in fact the Hilton Paris, or the Paris Hilton. Okay, so it's just a fairly kind of common example that SEOs use to show that sometimes Google can get it wrong. And actually, further to that, if you were to reverse the search term and search for Hilton Paris, it gives you the search results that you might expect to find from a search like that, which is Hilton.com and the knowledge graph that talks about the Hilton hotel in Paris. So there's a lot going on with context, and it's also worth mentioning at this point that devices play a big part. So searches on desktops, laptops, tablets, mobile devices, etc. That will all have a part to play in your given search results, and there's an example of that within news later on in the deck. So moving on then to what are your prospects and customers searching for? This is important because you want to gain an understanding of what your audience is interested in. And from a keyword research perspective, keywords are words and phrases that users enter into search engines. So as I've just showed you, Paris Hilton, Hilton Paris, and French hotels, I think it was. So there are different types of keywords, and you need to have an understanding of this when you're building a keyword universe. There are branded keywords, which are fairly straightforward. There are campaign-led keywords. So, for example, here you might have a brand that has produced a print ad or a television advert, and the call to action might be go ahead and search online for a given keyword phrase. So in this instance, the example is Sky Sports GAA. So if Sky are running a campaign to promote the fact that GAA is shown, please God when it returns, they may well use a call to action that is something like search for Sky Sports GAA. And then if the traditional marketing department is talking to the online marketing department and they're doing their job, they will have created a web page that ranks well for Sky Sports GAA. And that web page would be a landing page that might include an offer that was referenced in the print or the television ad. So there are campaign keywords to bear in mind as well. More importantly, perhaps, there are informational and educational terms. So this is where Google would have an understanding that you're looking for information, or it might be kind of something you're trying to educate yourself about. So maybe Timbuktu, if you don't know where that is in the world, or how to change a light bulb, those sorts of phrases. They shouldn't be ignored because they can be an important part of the research phase. So going back to Zero Moment of Truth or ADA, this is awareness phase. So if you have an e-commerce shop that is a DIY store, for example, you might want to write a blog post that's all about how to change a light bulb, because if you can get a user to engage with that content, they may well wish to go ahead and purchase the light bulb. Product-led keywords would be more along the lines of e-commerce, so a men's blue t-shirt, or my wife and I have just had our first child, a baby teething toy is something that I've searched for recently. And then transactional keywords would build on this. So they wouldn't be product-led, but they would be keywords that a user is interested in actually doing something with. So buying t-shirts, buy t-shirts, or signing up for something. So this is an example of signing up for a branded signing up for a branded package, so sign up. So Google understands that the words buy and sign up make a difference to the search, and I'll give some examples of that later on. So building a keyword universe then, or basically a long list of keywords that your audience might be interested in. The ways in which to do that, you can brainstorm. So you will know your business, your organization better than most. Put yourself in your prospects or your customers' shoes. So what would someone that doesn't know about your business but does maybe know about your products, what would they be searching for? What are your customers searching for in terms of repeat business? Get some people in from your own business, get in front of a whiteboard and just throw up some ideas. You could bring together a focus group. You could sit some of your customers down and ask them, what have you been searching for recently when it comes to my business? There are also some tools available. One is called Answer the Public, which is an extremely good tool online. And again, I'll share the link to download the deck so you can get to these resources easier at the end of the presentation. Answer the Public is an extremely good resource, free of charge. I think it's actually a freemium model, should I say. So you're able to do perhaps a search a day, and you can go to the tool, you can put in a key phrase, and it will return a multitude of different variants of that keyword. So different questions that users might be asking on the back of it, etc. Very good tool, very good for building a keyword universe. Google Instant is another tool you could use. So this is where you begin to type a phrase into Google, and it will return suggested phrases. So a good way of doing this particular piece of keyword research is to start with a phrase. It could be buy t-shirts, type that into Google, and then it will start to suggest different kind of next best suggested search terms, if you like. So you could start by using buy t-shirts A. That would give you all of the instant results associated with A. Buy t-shirts B, C, D, etc. And you'd be amazed how quickly you can grow your list of keywords that users might be interested in terms of buying t-shirts. Google Search Console will give you some pretty rich information in terms of keywords that your audience is already using to search for you and find you. So there might be keywords in there that you hadn't considered. And again, I'll show you how to use Google Search Console later in the presentation. And the keyword planner tool available from ads.google.com is probably the one that I use the most. That would be building a list of keywords based on usually competitive domains. So this is, I should say, something you'll need to sign up for. It technically is free of charge, although you'll need to give payment information to Google. Basically, you'll need an ads account. That's PPC, pay-per-click. Once you've created one, you can just pause a campaign and it won't cost you any budget. But you can go ahead and use the keyword planner tool that's within that platform, and it will return keywords that Google believes are associated with different domains. So your own domain is a really good place to start. but other competitors' domains is also very good for building up a list of keywords. Once you have that list, you can then go ahead and try to get some data from this keyword planner tool that looks at volume. Now, the caveat here is that it's focused on ads, so it will be returning impressions and click-through rate and potential clicks that the ads platform is giving you. However, it's still a good indicator. It's a good barometer of how many times a given keyword is being searched for, and that's important because, say you've built your keyword universe, and I've built them that can run into thousands of keywords. Actually, when you sort them by volume of search, you might be surprised at the ones that are searchable more, and actually they might be worth focusing your efforts on. So whilst you may have an indication of what your business is might like to be found for, in reality, searchers and users might be searching for something different. And if there's serious volume there, you want to be ranking for those keywords. So building out the keyword universe, not just in terms of a list of keywords, but actually going to do the work within the keyword planner tool that again is free, to understand which keywords are being searched for more often. That's an important part of building the universe out. So once you have your list of keywords, you could then turn your attention to your own website and how to optimize on-site elements. So site structure is a huge part of this. A quick example from Amazon.com. So this is a search with a prefix site colon, which just means that I'm seeing results from Amazon.com. And in this instance, there are 380 million of them. So 380 million pages exist on Amazon.com as of yesterday, when I took this screenshot. And so Google's trying to make sense of that. Okay, now Amazon actually host a lot of their products directly off the root. So that means Amazon.com/Harry Potter DVD or whatever the product might be. As an SEO, I don't particularly like that approach. I think using subfolders is the way to do it. But then again, Amazon is an extremely successful domain, so who am I to criticize? The reason they've done that directly off the root is because when it comes to relevance, as I've talked about, having a keyword phrase closer to the start of the domain, so in that instance, Amazon.com/Harry Potter DVD, is useful for those searchers searching for Harry Potter DVD. However, there is an argument to say you could use subfolders such as movies, DVDs, etc., and I'll talk about that on this slide. So using logical content hierarchy and taxonomies that the Googlebot can understand is an efficient way of building your website. So to use an example from my finance days, the FTSE 100 is an index within the stock market that is within shares, and it's an investment. It's not a fund, it's not an investment trust, etc. So this is a simple, hopefully quite a simple taxonomy. That could be translated into a subfolder hierarchy that is /investments, /shares, /stock market, /FTSE 100, or example.com/investments, /shares, /stock market, and the hyphenated character there is important because Google understands it's two separate words. And then FTSE-100. That's not a major detail. If your subfolders are written as stock market or one word, it can still understand that they are two words, but I would advise, if you can, using hyphens between your subfolders. So that's the site structure. And avoiding unnecessary subfolders and pages is a good idea too. So what I mean by that is, if you had example.com/website /investments, there's no need to include that subfolder website. These are all things within your control. If you have a web designer that perhaps has built the site a few years back and you're looking at the hierarchy of the way your site's been built, it could be worth going back to that web designer and saying, can we have a look at renaming the subfolders, please, etc. A few things, and this comes into the Google Webmaster Guidelines that I was talking about. So avoiding sneaky redirects, so things like 302s and 301s, which are a certain type of server redirect, it can absolutely be used properly. but sneaky redirects, so having content that the user visits and then they're redirected somewhere else for no reason, that's not within or against the guidelines. Cloaking, which is where you would serve different content to Googlebot than you would the user. So you're telling Google that a page is, the relevance is all about one topic, and then actually when the user visits, they're seeing a different topic. That's not allowed. And moving on to metadata. So once you've got your site structure in place, metadata, I'm defining this as two elements of a particular web page. So this is every web page that exists within the HTML. You have the ability to write a page title and a meta description. You could define metadata as some other bits that I'm going to talk about on the next slide, but for the purposes of this, I'm talking about a page title and a meta description. So these appear within search results, and this is where relevance plays its part in ranking. So using an example from before, this is actually a piece of metadata I wrote getting on for 7 or 8 years ago now, and is in position 1 as of yesterday, actually, for the term FTSE 100. So FTSE 100 market overview is the first keyword, if you like. The first keyword is FTSE 100 there, which is relevant to the search term FTSE 100, obviously. And then view the latest FTSE 100 chart, FTSE 100 constituent companies, plus live FTSE 100 share prices. So there's a few things going on in that metadata, one of which is the use of FTSE 100 4 times. Google have said that within a meta description, which is the part that appears beneath the page title, this black bit of writing, that's a meta description, that it doesn't actually pay any attention to the amount the keyword is used there. However, from the user perspective, you can see that when you viewed that search engine results page and the words FTSE 100 are in bold 3 times, that does have an impact because it draws your eye to it. So if you're ranking in 3rd or 4th position, you want to try and win the click from the user, and actually that's not a bad tactic. There's also the brand name in there, so a bit of brand association. If someone's heard of the brand before, they may be inclined to click on it. And finally, we've got plus live FTSE 100 share prices, so a little bit of a USP on that web page, and inviting the user to click. Should also say that crafting and writing page titles and meta descriptions for search engines shouldn't probably be the primary focus. You should always be writing for the user in mind. So you shouldn't just be putting FTSE 100 6 times in the page title, or FTSE 100 more than it should be mentioned in the meta description, because you're still writing for the user. And whilst you need to get keywords in there for relevance, you should also be compelling. So using words like view, plus, live, etc., is a good way of winning that click from the SERP. The way the metadata is actually scripted, apologies, this is quite small, but this is taken from a live website, hl.co.uk, and then the URL is there. Anyone can view this. You go to any web page, right click and view source in most browsers. And you can see here, hopefully you can see that on lines 7 and 8 of the code, the page title sits here and the meta description sits here. And that's what's appearing within search. So just trying to show you really here that within your web pages, you have the ability to control this metadata, and this is what Google's returning within live search results. So in this particular instance, lines 7 and 8, that's actually very, very high up in terms of the code of the page. You could have web pages that run into the tens of thousands lines of code, and if you consider that Googlebot is starting to read from top to bottom, having a page title and meta description as close as possible to the top or contained within the head of the HTML is an important thing to try to achieve as well. So technical best practices, I'll try my best to explain these as simply as I can. Canonical tags, the use of these would be where you might have 2 competing web pages on your own domain, and you would use one to signal to Google that this is the best or the most relevant or the canonical version of the URL. Using a secure certificate, so HTTPS as opposed to HTTP, Google have said that as a factor, they take that into consideration. A secure site is better than a non-secure site. Using names correctly for images, so going back to relevance again, so using the FTSE 100 example, if there was a graph of the FTSE 100 on that page and it was an image and it was static, naming the graph FTSE-100-chart or graph, for example, .jpg or .gif or whatever it might be, is important, because that's the way Google understands what an image is all about. And using an alternative tag or an alt tag is important as well, because not only from a accessibility standpoint, but also from a search engine standpoint, again, it's more mud to throw at the wall, if you like, and telling Google all about what your web page is about from a relevance standpoint. So there are other meta tags to do with robots, and this is actually to do with no indexing and no following a web page. That can be useful if you're looking to increase the potency of other web pages on your site. So you may have a landing page, for example, that is very close to another page, and you absolutely don't want to show it in search. For example, you might have a campaign that's being promoted in print, and the easiest way of tracking it via web analytics might be to be able to see the visits to that particular web page. And if there was visits from organic search, you might skew those numbers. So no indexing would be a use of a robot meta tag. You could also no follow links from your web page. That's an indicator to Google to not follow any links. So if you consider that those votes of confidence that I talked about that are pouring into your website, links out are kind of diluting that a little bit. So no indexing is a way of not passing that link equity to other sites. Robots.txt, so this is a file that sits on the root of your domain, so example.com/robots.txt. And within that file, you can disallow various web pages. These might be web pages that you don't have the ability to put a canonical tag or robot meta tag on. So, for example, an admin console login in WordPress, where you don't have the control over what's within the HTML, you could include that within a robots.txt disallow function. And you also reference where your XML sitemap is, which is another important file to have of the root of your site. So example.com/sitemap.xml. By default, I believe that WordPress sites, if you do build in WordPress, is to have an index, a sitemap index, which breaks down further your website into kind of subfolded categories. If your site is less than, say, 1,000 pages big, you probably don't need to do that. You could do a single sitemap in XML, and that would be sufficient for Google to look at. And you wouldn't need to go to the extent of building a sitemap index. As I say, by default in WordPress, you will get the sitemap index, but to tidy it up and kind of play by the rules of Google, that they would, I suppose, prefer a singular XML sitemap, and that's something that you can submit in Google Search Console. So moving on to local listings, then these are really just quick examples. I should say first and foremost that ORM Accountants are a new client of AMO Digital. They're based down the road there in Fleming's Lane in Killarney, and I just wanted to show this because of the knowledge graph which we worked on recently. So you can see here that there's some information being presented to the user based on a branded search, and this just doesn't happen by accident. You have control of your own business if you do have a local bricks and mortar business at business.google.com. And you can influence these criteria that are appearing here. So ensuring that the absolute correct website, so if it's HTTPS, not HTTP, or www. or not, that does make a difference too, so making sure that's absolutely correct. Your address, the hours that you open, I know that you can now make additions with COVID-19 to tell if you've got any special opening hours, the phone number, and really this is again, about if there's a stimulus from a user to go ahead and search from your brand, making it as easy as possible to find you. This stuff is within your control, and then the organic result here, if someone would choose to click on it. More of an informational search, so sticking with the accountants and using accountants Killarney. This is where Google's understanding that you have a localized search for a service. So it's offering you results from directory sites such as Golden Pages, Yelp, and Silex, but it's also showing you a map. So for example, Hotels Killarney would give a similar result. The way in which to optimize for listings within local are multiple. One of the factors is the amount of reviews and the strength of those reviews that you have. This example actually shows you that it's of course not an exact science, because there are no reviews for this particular accountant, and the one just under, there is 1 5-star review, and obviously one's on top of the other. Geography does play a part as well, so you can see that O'Brien Coffee McSweeney are just out on the Tralee Road, but OCKT are right in the middle of town, so that will play a part too. There are various other factors that go into this, but just to really show you that this is a very different SERP to ones I've shown you previously. Search engine results page is very different because it is an informational localized search. Moving quickly on to news, I think we've only got about 15 minutes left. So Google News is an entirely separate, I wouldn't say separate index, but certainly separate to traditional searches. So I've used the example Irish government here. You can see that outside of gov.ie, which should rightly be ranking in position 1. The top stories as of yesterday were from the Irish Times, the Journal, and BBC News. If you're running a website that publishes news, I would advise and steer you to publish news that is unique and maybe is opinion and comment led, not just regurgitation of other news out there. And one thing to consider in that respect would be AMP. So accelerated mobile pages you can use actually for any pages on your site. Excuse me. There are resources after this slide to direct you to read more about it. But just to show that for this search term on a mobile versus a desktop, on a mobile we still have position 1, gov.ie, but the top stories here, the Irish Times and the Journal, which were our top two there. The Irish Times has an AMP icon, so they have scripted their web page, their story, using AMP, using an accelerated mobile page. But the Journal haven't, and this is by no means pointing the finger at the Journal at all, it's just an example. But the click to the Irish Times story loads extremely quickly. This is the point of accelerated mobile pages. It gives the user a quicker experience, and that's very important in this day and age. There are various statistics flying around about how little time you have to capture a user, so the quicker you can get content in front of them, particularly on a mobile when people are out and about, is important. And my experience with the Journal yesterday left me waiting for a few seconds as it loaded up. So again, these are things within your control that you can do on your site that improves the experience from the user. And whilst I'm unsure, to tell you the truth, if AMP does have an impact on search, in this particular example, the Irish Times is position 1, the Journal is position 2. I don't know if it does, but from Google's perspective, going back to one of the points I made originally, it's trying to show the best possible result for the user. So if the user can get to that content quicker, my best guess is that it will play a part in terms of AMP, and page load speed is a factor too. These are some resources you can visit if you do then load the deck. Some general points about Google News, which by the way, used to be something you had to apply to Google for, and you had to adhere to publisher guidelines. It's no longer the case. Google now indexes news stories which it believes to be news. So around certain terms, like I've showed that, you know, in this instance, the term Irish government, it's determining that as a news item. So if you have content that it believes is newsworthy, it may well may well index it within Google News. There are content policies, so there are guidelines in terms of what you would need. So, for example, a unique image on the page, and some other bits, I believe, maybe to do with schema, which is some advanced markup that you can use on your pages, and also worth checking out AMP, which doesn't have to solely be used for news pages as well. Shopping, so I just wanted to touch on this because of the webinar a couple of weeks back, so there may well be people on this webinar who have e-commerce sites, and it's just really to show very quickly that again, this is a different search engine's results page based on my query of baby teething toy, showing that in this instance we have sponsored results. Having looked into this in some detail, Google have actually announced that they'll be doing this for free. So you won't need to be paying for the privilege. This is the only part of the deck that does talk about sponsored ads, and this is to do with shopping results. So Google Shopping and run by your login to Google Merchant Center. When it does become free in Ireland and Europe, which is later this year, so it was announced in April and they're rolling it out in the US, it is something that you're going to want to take advantage of if you run an e-commerce website. But at present, they are sponsored. So these sites and these kind of aggregators are paying Google to be present. There's a lot of resources on this, and as I say, there's a blog post that talks about this in detail, and there's some merchants detail for Google Merchant Center, and also how to create a product feed, which will become far more valuable to you guys who do have e-commerce sites when it is available for free in Europe, which will be, I think, later this year. So lastly, Google Search Console, which is, as I say, a free tool offered by Google. Firstly, what is it? It helps you get richer keyword data. As I mentioned, that's really good for building a keyword universe. It gives you alerts for any issues that you might have on your site and helps you fix them, which can be really important, particularly if you've got web pages that are returning erroneous server status codes. You can be alerted to them and fix them quickly. You can measure your site search traffic. That's something you can do in Google Analytics, but to kind of give you a second point of reference, that's a nice addition to Search Console too. You can submit sitemaps, so as I mentioned, XML sitemaps, you can submit them directly to Google, and you can also look at how individual URLs are being indexed and submit them for crawling. That's really good, by the way, if you've got some new content that you want to be put into the index very quickly. And just another point of note, if you use the prefix info, so I showed an example earlier where I had a prefix of site:/amazon.com. If you use info: and the URL, that should return the information that Google has in the live index. You can also see how it's being crawled in the live index within Search Console, but just another test. You can also submit removal requests. So if you've got a URL that has been deleted, I'd always advise using a 404 or actually a 301 redirect if that's possible. So a 301 redirect is a permanent move in Google's eyes. So if it's a page that doesn't exist anymore and you want it deleted, create a 404 code, and Google should work that out. If you do have the option of redirecting it somewhere, a 301 redirect is the correct way of doing it if it's going to be a permanent move. And actually there's what's called a 302 redirect, which is a temporary move. And it's worth using those. So particularly if a web page has built up some authority or equity in terms of links, and you've got loads of links pointing to that page, if you want to hang on to that equity, you can redirect to another relevant page on your site and retain that equity. So don't just go ahead and remove URLs. If you do have to, have a think about if you can redirect. You can understand more about your site's performance on mobile devices. So as I say, I think the latest is around about 50-50 now in terms of searches performed on mobile versus desktop. Both are important. Responsive design would always be my steer. So that's one web page that behaves differently in terms of mobile and desktop. And that way you don't get into kind of conflicting detail. There are character lengths when you come to writing page titles and meta descriptions that you should adhere to because of truncation, so the way Google kind of cuts off the metadata. But I would say that if you're scripting correctly for mobile, it would normally work out pretty well on desktop too. Mobile first is an expression Google would like to use. You can also get crawling, indexing, and serving information. That's kind of, as I said, server status responses about your pages directly from Google's index too. It looks a bit like this. So this is amodigital.ie's Google Search Console front page, if you like, when you log in. So you're seeing some performance data. We have a relatively new website, so we're only getting a little bit of traffic through search. You're seeing some coverage, so valid pages versus pages with errors. And then down the left here are the bits that I talked about. You also see that there is reference to security and manual actions. So that's something that hopefully you'd like to avoid. This might be penalties that Google can place following a number of updates, such as Google Panda, Google Penguin, and a few other names of animals which escapes me at the moment. But those updates basically look at combating black hat SEO, which is stuff like sneaky redirects, cloaking, etc., where basically webmasters are trying to fool Google into ranking well. So there's been a lot of those updates over the years, and if you do end up with a manual action or a penalty, I'm afraid to say they are quite tricky to come back from. It's not impossible, but you can see and give you peace of mind every once in a while if you log into your search console and there's nothing in there. That's a good sign. And this is where you can visit Search Console to find out what it's all about. So finally, I know we've only got 5 minutes there. I've been going on a bit, apologies, but some takeaways for you. Every organization is different, as I said. You're going to have different business goals. You need to look at SEO as not an exact science, but there are things you can do to influence it positively. Do you have a keyword universe? If you do, maybe now's the time to revisit it. If not, go ahead and build one. Your metadata is optimized against those target keywords. So as I said, you could build out volume and see, perform a gap analysis of how your keywords are optimized against your metadata. So if you do have that, revisit it, and if not, go ahead and optimize it. Verification of Google Search Console, which doesn't take too long. If you do have it, well done, but if you don't, go and verify it ASAP. It's done through visiting the link in the former slide, and it's free of charge, as I say. It will need a DNS update. There's 2 ways of verifying. Go through the DNS method because it's the most stringent, and it will give you the richer data. You may need to contact your hosting provider to put some DNS or change, the DNS settings. It's nothing to worry about. It's one line of code that sits on the server, and your hosting provider should be able to either point in the right direction or do that for you. Finally, I think, the trading online voucher, which is a grant available from the local enterprise office. We've worked with a few clients now that have taken advantage of that. Certainly worth checking out if you haven't already. You can visit your local Leo. I think obviously for the most part that'll be Kerry, to find out more and start the application process. As I say, that's a grant that's available to any business that I believe is 10 employees or less and turning over €1 million or less in the last calendar year. And it's up to €2,500 to help with trading online. So worth checking out if you haven't already. And finally, if you do have any other questions or feedback, I know I've covered a fair amount there, but if there are any other questions or feedback, feel free to drop me a line directly. More than happy to email you back, or if you'd like to arrange a call at any time. As I say, I'm based on the High Street in Killarney, so more than happy to have a chat. Finally, most finally, you can visit amodigital.ie/webinar, where there's a small feedback form, and you can download this deck if you'd like. And with that, I think I could probably hand back to Paul for any questions. Thank you for listening.
James, thank you very much. It's Niall here. So
hi, Niall, sorry.
No, you're okay. If anybody, I have no questions on the question bar at the moment, so if anybody has any questions, please just type them into the box, or I can patch you in real time to speak to James, and by putting your hand up, or just put your name in the box and I can bring you in. I think Trina has her hand up here. Trina, do you want to come in and ask a question? Hello, Trina. No, hand has gone down actually. So, Paul, I think it's over to you. So much detail, I think everyone's questions are answered.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Niall. Thanks for that. James, thanks. I've got a million questions, but I think I'll probably ask them more directly. I know what I'm doing wrong anyway. I'm doing a lot wrong for sure. Anyway, listen, thanks very much for that, James. Very interesting and engaging, and thanks for joining us today. Thanks also to everyone for tuning in, and you will be able to find a recording of today's webinar on the Chamber's YouTube channel. The website killarney.ie is being currently updated to facilitate more COVID-friendly information and our new marketing campaign, so you can have a look at that as well. We'll be back next week, hopefully at 11 AM, and we'll update you during the week as to the content. In the meantime, if there is anything you would like to see on the webinar schedule, please contact us and let us know. Just one thing finally before I go today, if as many of you as possible could engage with the Let's Talk About Town survey, which is available on the Chamber's, Killarney Chamber of Tourism and Commerce Facebook page. It's also appearing on many other people's Facebook pages as we speak. It's very important that we get as many people as possible to engage with this. I think we're up to nearly 1,000, but we also want to get as diverse an audience engaging with it as we possibly can, and particularly the younger element between 18 and 35. So, can you please fill it out yourselves? Can you encourage your family to fill it out? Can you pass it to everybody that you know? Because this may well be useful in formulating policy for Kerry County Council as we go forward, and it's an opportunity to give your views on how the town is managed. So it's very, very important. It's called Let's Talk About Town. It's available on the Chamber's Facebook page, so please encourage as many people as you can to engage with it. So that's it from me today. Until next week at 11 AM, stay safe and have a good week. Thank you very much.